where naman is all about the bookstore rides for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest, special needs dad and disability advocate, no other than Mr. John Fela. Welcome
Hi,
to Book
Daniel. How are you?
101. Yes, fabulous, fabulous, Mr. John, and welcome to Book 101. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I am, first of all, a father of disability. I have a special needs son with autism. My son, Chris, who is 17, he is autistic and he's also nonverbal. I am a special needs disability advocate, meaning that I do a lot of public speaking around the country. I've been interviewed on numerous podcasts, done a lot of writing, mostly blogging for several organizations also around the country. But I'm excited to say that my own book, my own memoir of my journey as a special needs dad, will be coming out later this year. And I've contributed to a few other friends' books as well, including a book that a friend will be doing with the legendary Temple Grandin, which is probably a name that most folks of disability know. I do all of this on the side. By the way, my day job is I work for an organization called Johnny and Friends. It's not my organization, but it's a global organization that I work for that supports people and families with disability, and I work out of our Chicago area office. I'm all disability all the time. The joke I like to share is that I call myself the Swiss Army knife of disability advocacy because I do a little bit of everything.
Mr. John Fella, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And let's talk about not just that. What is the central message you want to convey, and why did you feel this perspective on fatherhood needed to be shared?
Mainly because the thing that I learned as a dad was, first of all, it's hard enough to be a parent, but it's especially hard to parent a child with a severe disability, like in my son's case. But even more than that, I found that as a man, it was a challenge because, unlike my son's mother, who I'm divorced from, women process in different ways, moms process in different ways. My son's mom was always a great mom, still is, handles all of the details of his life and those types of things. And I certainly contributed to that, but she was the one who always kind of took charge. And for me, I had to kind of figure out who I was, right? What was my gifting? What was the thing that I kind of put into the relationship, into the marriage, into fathering my son? What did I bring to the table, so to speak? So I found over time, and again, this was through some very challenging seasons in our life. I found out that my gifting was really relationships and building relationships and seeking out community, which quite honestly we desperately needed, and a lot of families in our situation do need it. What I did is I very intentionally started to seek out and build community of other families like ours, and specifically other dads like me. And of course, then that blossomed over several years into again everything that I'm doing now. But that only came about because um, I realized in the hard times what I didn't have, and the fact that I wasn't as resourced as I could have been. And so not only did I want to get resourced for myself and my family, but I also wanted to give back to those who really needed it as well.
Give back. It's something else to the world. Mr. John, how do you define not just a dad in contrast to traditional fatherhood roles?
Well, a dad in my situation, it's going to be different because, for example, my son is 17, and normally you might be thinking about, okay, your child is going to go off to college, they're going to get a job, they're going to get married, have kids, whatever they're going to do, right? In my son's case, none of that will happen. He will never be independent. He will never have his own life. Really, we have to kind of create a life for him between myself, his mom, his stepmom, as I'm remarried now. We have to figure out what that looks like for him because he'll never be able to do that on his own. Now, for a lot of families and parents in our situation, that very much can be the case. Sometimes it's not as extreme as it is in our case, in our situation, but it can be to the point where you always have to be um, kind of being intentional with your child's life, thinking about what their plans are and working with them on making a plan for their life. So some friends, for example, have kids that are more capable and more can kind of be self-regulating in that sense. But for our son, that's not the case, and so we need to just kind of not only think about his future, but really totally plan it out for him every step.
Mr. John, we salute you for doing that to your son. You're such an awesome father, and you deserve a big of applause. How can fathers authentically embrace their identity beyond being a parent without guilt?
That's a great question. Um, you know, guilt is it's something that families like me know a lot about. The issue I think that comes up, especially when kids are young and you just kind of find out that this is exactly who your child is in terms of their disability, which again I would say they're not just their disability certainly, but a lot of families struggle, and especially dads, with shame, certainly fear and anxiety, but it's this idea that as a man you just want to be able to fix things, right? Men are fixers by nature. What do I have to do? Who do I have to talk to? What doctor does he have to see? What therapist does he have to see? Let's just get it fixed. Well, sometimes it's not that easy, and sometimes that just doesn't happen. So what a parent and especially a dad needs to do is to really, one, remember that your child is your child, right? The disability may appear like it changed things, but it really didn't, because they're still your child, son, daughter, whatever. And you have to lean into their life. You have to, again, intentionally get involved. You have to develop that relationship, and you need to be able to do as many things as possible that you normally would with, say, a typical child. I give a great example of my son liking sports. He can't really play sports. He doesn't have the coordination. He doesn't have the motor skills, but he loves watching sports on TV, right? We enjoy doing that. We used to have a basketball hoop in the driveway. He couldn't really shoot the ball, but he liked when I did it. He could watch me doing it and he would cheer and get excited for me. That's great. We'd pass the ball between each other. It was our way of having that time together, of having that experience. Was he ever going to play for his high school or a college team? Was he ever going to do a travel league or anything like that? No, but it didn't matter because we still had that experience. So this is an example of when I say dads need to get over the guilt and the shame, totally embrace their child and say, hey, you know what, it's not going to look the same as maybe some other guys I know, but it still has meaning, it still has value, and if you love your child you still want to have that relationship.
What's your biggest piece of advice for dads feeling torn between career and family?
That's tough because many times I think men feel the pull, they feel the tug. um, One thing that I know from speaking to a lot of dads around the country, and or their wives, is most men, when you have something like this in your family, they really throw themselves into their work. They throw themselves into their career. They try to make all of the money to cover all of the things. And that's good. That's a good thing. But the problem then is that many times it causes distance between the family, between the spouse especially. And I should mention that the divorce rate among special needs families is extreme. It's much more so than the national average. I won't give an exact quote because the numbers change all the time, but it's very high. And so what happens is that men feel an obligation to take care of their family by making all of this money or throwing themselves into their work. At the same time, if they are distant from the family emotionally and the relationship with their spouse or with their child for that matter, then that puts pressure on that family and on those relationships. And then of course what happens is that you have the guilt and the shame come in, and a lot of the finger pointing about, I do this and you don't do this, or you don't do enough of this. So this is where I think men have to balance it and remember that they're more than their checkbook. They're more than what's in the bank account. Obviously, that's an important thing, but it's not the only thing. And I would argue it's not the main thing. The main thing is the relationship you have with your family. you have to lean into that, and you have to build into that, because ultimately, hard times will come. If you're a parent of disability, you know something about that, and you're probably going through a lot more than maybe you thought you would. But that's why building into your relationships within your family, spouse, children, etc., will matter that much in order to get you through all of life storms.
Mr. John, how can fathers prioritize self care and personal passions without feeling selfish?
Great question. So let me tell you, one of the best pieces of advice that I have for families in our situation, and really for any, but especially for ours, and this is something we learned from a marriage counselor years ago, is that you have to structure self care time. It is necessary, it is vital. You cannot give if you have nothing to give, right? And so one of the things that we learned was, first of all, we had to make time on the calendar, and you can do this on a regular old school wall calendar or virtually on your phone or whatever you got. But you need to first of all make time for, if you're married, you need to make time for you and your spouse to have like a date night together. That doesn't mean you spend a bunch of money on a fancy whatever, but you need to intentionally say we're going to have a night when we're going to connect, and it's just about us. But then on the other nights, on those other days, you need to build in days of self care for each other, for mom and dad, right? You have the self care so that one, you can recharge your batteries, but two, because remember, when you're burned out, and if you feel like you're doing too much of one thing in any area, there's going to be resentment, there's going to be anger, there's going to be frustration. So allow your partner to get that time to recharge. That time is their own. They want to exercise, they want to go to the coffee shop with a friend, they want to go, to the gym, whatever whatever their thing is, that's fine. But then that time is their time, and then the other person gets an equal amount of time. You can always, go back and forth about what days work better for anybody, but you need to intentionally hammer that out, right? It is so critical, because without that, then, and I know from my own experience, we would get into a rhythm or a cycle where I would always feel guilty if I wasn't taking our son more, because I knew my wife was managing all these things, and she worked, and she worked very hard, and so there was always this kind of, again, these feelings of guilt and shame about, I've got to take care of him, even if it means I have nothing left for myself. That's not okay. Because not only is it not fair to you, but it's not fair to your child, because then they're not going to get your best, and your spouse certainly isn't going to get your best either. So make sure that you're taking that intentional time, and it's easy to feel guilt and shame, but know that it's actually not only a support for you, but for the whole family.
Mr. John, very well said. Beautifully, beautifully articulated. What role does partnership play in helping dad's life as not just a dad?
I'm sorry, can you repeat it?
What role does partnership play in helping dads live as a not just a dad?
Yeah, so I know for myself, you want to make sure that you have a great relationship, obviously with your spouse, co-parent, partner, but at the same time, I can tell you that my relationships with other dads I've made, many special needs dads, not all, but men who really kind of leaned in a very intentional and very healthy way to their lives, to their families, and if there is disability, to their kids. Those relationships many times led to, again, uh, as I said, me being able to do things in terms of my own advocacy, whether that was working with other special needs dads in support groups, for example, which I've been a part of many and I run as well. Sometimes that's meant working with someone else's nonprofit type of a thing. I have many friends that are special needs dads that are doing their own nonprofits, that are doing their own organizations, whatever kind of their focus is. And so because of those partnerships, one, not only have I gotten great resources, as I've mentioned, but I've also developed great relationships. I've developed great friendships. And the real fruit of all those things are the relationships I've made, because through that, what I've been able to do is say, okay, this is not only someone I can get an answer to a question for, this is someone that I can spend time with, that understands me, that gets me, that knows who I am and what I'm about, right? And in a lot of cases, my son has made friends with other kids of some of my dad friends as well. But again, that partnership piece really leans into a big word for me, which is community. You need community, and I always say that that's really the thing that I harp on the most. You cannot walk this life alone. You need community. You need people in your life. I didn't have it years ago. I had to intentionally find it, look for it, make it. But through all of these different experiences I've had, now I have people that not only can I ask a question of, but even if I'm having a really hard day, sometimes it's just as simple as a text to one of my dad friends. You know what, such and such just happened. This is how I'm feeling, and someone's there to listen, right? And ultimately, that's probably one of the greatest gifts you could have.
The greatest gift. Totally agree with you, Mr. John. And as a dad, what are your short term and long term goals?
Yeah, so as a dad, so my short-term goals, well, definitely I want to see my son taken care of. He's currently living out of state because he's going to a special school out of state, and he's going to finish his high school years, and he's going to come back home. So short term, just to help him with that transition, figure out what his living situation is going to be. He may still be at home for a bit until we find like a residential home placement kind of a thing. And also short term goals, in terms of being a dad for me, is also a lot of this advocacy work, and in terms of everything that I do, and again, looking forward to some big projects. But long term, I want to set him up as best as I possibly can, making sure that again he has a great living situation. And he's probably not someone who's ever going to hold a job, not in the traditional sense, but seeing how he can be involved in his community. How can he be maybe do some volunteer work, or maybe he can have a simple job somewhere. But most of all, how can we make his life rich and full? And so, as many ways as I can help that, that's great. And certainly that could include taking him on trips to places, and spending time that way. And again, as my professional advocacy work grows, the hope is that as I go to more places, he can certainly come with. He can travel to these things, and he can really kind of experience that, because quite honestly, he is the reason for all of it in the first place. So I never would have embarked on this if I wasn't a parent first. And I know many parents in similar roles and situations. So it really is a gift. The world can say that you have a child with a disability or autism, and that's such a terrible thing, and that must be horrible. You know what? It's been a great blessing in my life, because I've had so many wonderful experiences, made so many great relationships, and have so many wonderful friendships just because of his situation. I've been able to be a better man, a better father, a better husband, and also, be quite honestly a better friend, and have some great friends to show for it.
Good luck to your goals, Mr. John. And what is your piece of advice for those dad out there want to be responsible dad?
I kind of touched on it just now. I'll say it again though, and usually when someone asks me this advice, and I frame it because I was a teacher for years before I started doing all of this, so I think with the teacher brain. So I say it's my one little A, one little B advice. So one little A for me personally is my faith as a Christian. My Christian faith is what really has been the ultimate support for me. I've been able to lean into that. I've been able to lean into good men and people that support me through church, and through other groups. Um, but I realize that not everybody listening to this is either going to be a Christian or religious or spiritual, and that's totally fine. So I say that is, for me, what works. But one B, one little B, is something that we all need, regardless, and that is community. You cannot do this alone. You must have relationships. You must have those people in your life that can speak into your life. What I struggled with early on, again, it wasn't the fact that I didn't have family or that I didn't have friends. I didn't have folks that understood me, or understood what my experience was, or what I was going through. So I very much needed that, and I had to intentionally seek that out, and in many ways kind of create it, through a variety of approaches, whether that was support groups, or doing some of this advocacy work, or whatever it was. So, don't do this walk alone is my best advice. If you are a dad listening to this and you're in a situation very similar to mine, you can always reach out to me. I'm happy to engage with you, happy to connect with you, happy to give you some advice. There are wonderful dad specific special need dad organizations I'm connected with that have great support groups and great resources connected to them. So we can get you what you need wherever you are, but please don't do this alone. Even if you have no one, get at least one person. And I've always said, even if I'm that one person, I'm more than happy to do that for anyone because I know what it was like for me. And it's that necessary to have someone that gets you.
Thank you for your advice, Mr. John. And what's one small action listeners can take today to start embracing your mindset?
You know what? I think one of the things when people ask me how has having a child with a disability changed you, having a child with a disability, I would say, has made me a kinder person. It's made me more compassionate. It's made me more empathetic. Okay. Um, Most people, unfortunately, if they don't have an experience of disability, for example, in their own life, in their own family, someone they know, a lot of times they don't get it. They ignore it. Many times, you might see, let's say, a child having a meltdown at the store or at the movies, or maybe even an adult having that experience, and you might be wondering what's that about and what's going on, and I don't know what it is, but it looks weird to me. Well, the easiest thing that we can do to make life better for someone like myself and our family is to just be compassionate and kind, right? It doesn't cost anything and it doesn't take that much energy. And if you are called to do it, and if it's something that you're encouraged to do, maybe you even engage a family, with a child with a disability or an individual with a disability. Sometimes we appreciate things as just as kind as sitting in a restaurant and saying, hey, how's your day, how are you guys doing? Whether somebody's having a good day or not, sometimes that makes all the difference, that people like us feel that we're welcomed and that we're included, wherever we go out in society and community. And that's something that I always share with people. For myself, I know that someday when I'm gone, when I'm no longer here, my son will be without his parents. My son will be without the people who've cared for him all his life. At some point, there are going to be other people that'll care for him, and everybody else he knew will be gone. I've always said that the thing that keeps me up at night, that scares me the most, is leaving him in a world that is not kind to him, that doesn't have compassion, that doesn't care enough about him. And so he may live in a world where, he's already going to be marginalized enough, but we don't need to add to that. But we can do small things each day. And that is just be compassionate and kind to those, especially when you can identify that maybe there's disability in the family or an individual. Obviously, be kind to everybody. That should go without saying. But I think for some folks, we just need that gentle reminder. Please be kind and compassionate to us because it really means the world.
Again, very well said, Mr. John. Truly empowering answer. But before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in its fifth season as well. Geography 101 in its fourth season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and Mental Health 101. Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 Review and Music 101 in its fourth season, and my Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. Mr. John, if you could leave fathers with one transformative takeaway from your mindset, what would it be?
I would say always remember that your greatest value is the relationship you have with your child. Don't ever forget that, and don't ever believe that if you are not if you are not overflowing with abundance in a certain area financially or even if you're struggling in, let's say in your relationship or work or whatever it is, remember that the greatest thing you can do is just lean into your role as a dad. Kids like ours need that so much. All kids do. But don't ever get stuck on you're not doing enough, or you are not enough, or you're just this, or you're not enough of that. You brought up the tagline, not just a dad. Well, yes, I do many other things, but I am a dad first and foremost, and I always go back to the fact that if I wasn't a dad, none of this other stuff would be happening. And at the end of the day, if all of this ended tomorrow, I would still be a dad, and that would still be good enough. So lean into the value of that role. You are enough just as you are. Bring your gifts and your tools and your talents to the table in your relationship with your child, disability or not, because it matters that much.
Yes, people, to all the fathers out there, be responsible for our generations to come. Mr. John Fela, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy being a good father?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I also like to joke, I'm all over the Google machine, so you can punch my name into the interweb and see all of the stuff that I have. I have a variety, again, of blogs, podcasts, video presentations, certainly my website, which is just johnfella.com. But find me on all the social media handles: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. And again, please look out for my book coming out later this year, Faith Like My Father. It should be coming out by the end of the year. It is the memoir of my life and journey as a special needs dad. So love for you to check that out as well.
Yes, Mr. John, you are most welcome to come back on Book 101 Review and let's promote your book to the world. Yes, people, let's support Mr. John Fella because if you support him, more and more and more empowering advocacy to come. Mr. John, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
More to come, people. See you soon.